On the list of things that the world really needed, I feel like another football show is probably pretty low on the list. I feel like we've got quite a few. Um, but I've also learned that it's okay to do things just for fun. So here I am, and I'm going to do a show for fun, mostly as an excuse to just talk to a bunch of people who know way more about football than I do, and hope that you will enjoy it and come along for the ride. I'm Luke Easterling. If you're here, maybe you've seen my work on Draft Wire and the Bucks Wire with USA Today, SMG. If there's another outlet that exists that writes about football, chances are I probably had a cup of coffee there as well. And I don't know, man, it's just going to be fun to talk some football. I figured there's only really one way that I would start a show, and that's to just rope one of my closest friends in to do it with me, because that's what you do when you do these types of things. So we're going to bring in a guy that, again, I've had a cup of coffee at a bunch of different places. Half of those places I've had the pleasure and the opportunity, not sure if he would call it that, the ability to work with this guy. He is now the owner of Bears Talk, one of the best places to find your Chicago Bears news, if that's what you're into. And that's why he's here to discuss some quarterbacks with us. Let's go ahead and bring him in. Bryan Perez from Bears Talk. What's going on, my man?
What's going on, Luke? I don't know why you chose me to be the first guest of that one football show, but I'm honored. It's a privilege, and it's my pleasure to be here with you, my friend.
I mean, you're that one guest now. That's how it is.
That's right. I will always be the first.
I will always be the first. Dude, I gotta be honest. You were the one that kind of tipped me off with the whole 8-bit thing, right? You and I have been kicking around. I was throwing you some ideas. I was showing you some of this stuff as I was putting this together, and it just kind of clicked, right? We had that 8-bit music. It throws us all back to being kids and those early days of football video games, man. What was your intro to like football video game? It was like the first game you remember playing with that sound.
Yeah, listen, I might be dating myself, but there was nothing better than Tecmo Bowl, and then the reboot of Super Tecmo Bowl or Tecmo Super Bowl. I don't know where the super came in the lineage of the words there, but what's great now is how things come full circle. It's just like the NFL, right? It's a cyclical game where we're going to start slowly seeing the return of like the power running game in the league after all these years of high flying passing offenses. Video games somehow are matching that too. My sons, I have a 13-year-old and a 10, soon to be 11-year-old, and they're now playing this new game that's like the craze of iPads and iPhones. It's called Retro Bowl. It's literally a reboot
I have
of
it. I play it. It's fantastic.
So it's amazing. So the 8-bit has withstood the test of time, and hopefully it'll do the same for your show, man.
Dude, no other game has still to this day been able to perfect the TV cam, right? The sideways.
Dude, you are everything absolutely
else,
right.
Madden is straightforward. You're all playing everything. The old days, Tecmo Bowl, it was like, I can play sideways, and this actually works. No game has been able to do that. Bo Jackson in Tecmo or Michael Vick in Madden, 04, I think it was, whatever, 02 maybe. Who are you taking? Madden Vick or Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl?
I'm Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl, no doubt about it. First overall, first round grade, the blue chip of all blue chippers in video games. You could literally start at your own goal line, go all the way down to your opponent's goal line, come all the way back to your goal line. You could literally gain about 400 yards on one carry with him. It was truly fun times.
I miss the ambulance onto the field every time. If you have a sprained ankle, ambulance comes onto the field every time. I love it.
Amazing.
Listen, we could talk nostalgia. We could talk video games all night long, but we're here to talk quarterbacks, man. We got to start where the NFL starts, where the sport itself starts right now when it comes to team building and being successful. And obviously, I see you're rocking the hoodie there. You're going to do some shameless plug there for your merchandise there at Bears Talk. But we are of one mind, you and I, when it comes to the Justin Fields hype train. We've been on that for quite some time now. But I want to kind of pull back a little bit on that draft class, because anytime you have 5 quarterbacks in the top 15 picks, all of those players' careers are going to be intertwined, right? All of those narratives that we're seeing even before the draft and now a couple of years later, those things are all going to be intertwined. We're going to talk about comparing those guys to each other for the rest of their careers, however long or short those may be. So now that we're getting kind of to the end of the second season of those careers, let's try to restack that group, right? How would you rank those guys? I feel like we have to start with Trey Lance, because where do we put Trey Lance? Do we even give him any sort of grade at this point. He's sat his entire rookie year, basically. Now he's out for most of his second season. I feel like we almost have to throw him out, don't you?
I mean, it's kind of weird how this has worked out because Trey Lance right now, as we get to the end of his second season, is kind of still the Trey Lance that he was at North Dakota State when he only started how many games and missed the COVID year and played one COVID game. Remember that? It was just, I mean, he barely had a resume of college production, one great season of college production before he entered the league, and was kind of this great unknown, unbelievably blessed with his physical traits. But in terms of really feeling comfortable and confident about your scouting report with Trey Lance, and he was a buyer beware prospect. Now it's too early to say whether or not he's a bust. He has just had, first year he sat behind Garoppolo. This year he breaks his ankle. He's out for the season. It's tough to look at that pick, though, Luke, and say the 49ers are happy they traded all those first rounders for him, especially when they see what Justin Fields is doing right now in Chicago, which we'll touch on in a minute, and what Mac Jones has even done up to this point over his first 2 years as a starter. That kind of production, even if they had Mac Jones to kind of replace Jimmy Garoppolo.
Don't they have Mac Jones and Brock Purdy right now?
I guess you could say they do, right? I mean, and that's the beauty.
That might make him feel worse, though.
That's true. I mean, that's the beauty of the NFL draft, though, right? I mean, the Brock Purdys are always lurking in the shadows somewhere, and they could turn a average or below average draft class into a Hall of Fame general manager career if you hit on a guy like Brock Purdy. But Trey Lance, I think, is exactly where I would have projected he'd be right now. Still, even if he was playing, even if he was on the field, not injured, and starting for the 49ers, I think the ups and downs would be about even for him, and we still wouldn't know exactly who he is moving into 2023.
So if we pull him out, I feel like there are two tiers with these guys. And obviously you joked in my direct messages earlier today about how you would stack those tiers, but I feel like there's a good section and a bad section. And I feel like Mac Jones and Zach Wilson obviously are in the bad section. I feel like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence are in the good section. Taking the lackluster performances we've seen so far, if you were to compare Zach Wilson to Mac Jones, what are the differences there? Has Mac Jones been that much better than him, even though he's still the starter in New England? What has been the difference that has separated those two guys? And then collectively, why are they nowhere near, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields where they're at?
Well, yeah, I don't think there's even a comparison right now between Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. Mac Jones is a guy who probably could hang around and have a Kirk Cousins-like career in the league. He underwhelms you with his physical traits, but when it's all said and done, you look at the end of season box score, maybe he's around that 4,000 plus yard mark. His team is over 500 more than it's not, and he's just a pretty good, above average NFL starter, which those guys are hard to find. And when you have one, you usually keep them around for a long time. Whereas Zach Wilson, right. I don't know, man. He's got those, pre-brilliant comeback last week for Baker Mayfield. He kind of has those Baker vibes where he's a little arrogant. Maybe his personal opinion of himself is a lot higher than his actual physical traits and ability on the field. And that creates a combustible recipe where you have a guy who thinks they're better than they are and doesn't have the self-awareness to take the blame, to shoulder the blame. We saw that that's what essentially ended his starting run in New York, was his inability to accept his own role in the very, very poor output in the Jets passing game. So I think Mac Jones has it upstairs. Zach Wilson doesn't. Zach Wilson might be more physically gifted, but Luke, we've seen plenty of physically gifted quarterbacks wash out of the league real quick. It's the guys who have the mental makeup who can survive longer, even if their physical traits aren't necessarily as overflowing. I just think Mac Jones has a very low ceiling. And by low ceiling, I don't know what you would value Kirk Cousins at, but we'll say that's about as good as it could get for Mac Jones, whereas Zach Wilson could very well be in the XFL or USFL 2 years from now.
See, I'm gonna take your bait on Baker Mayfield here, because you were adamant going into that draft that you kind of were worried about that with Baker Mayfield coming out in his draft, right? And so now that you kind of see on the back end of his process that he's gone through with the Browns and then with Carolina, and now obviously one game after 20 minutes of game planning with the Rams, do you see that type of road being the kind of thing that maybe Zach Wilson will have to go through if he's going to stick, right? He's going to have to go through some adversity and prove that he can kind of bounce back and humble himself maybe a little bit before he can stick around in the league.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. And I'm not even ready to say that Baker Mayfield is there where he's humbled himself
Right.
and he's ready. I mean, that was essentially what happened when he was replaced by Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. Carolina, it didn't click. And, Baker Mayfield is your prototypical playground quarterback. What he did with the Rams is exactly what Baker Mayfield can do. He probably would have a 10-year career as one of the top backup quarterbacks. Bring him in, injury replacement. He's only got to play 2 games or 2 quarters for you, and he can produce. But the minute you start putting the weight of a franchise on his shoulders, the mental makeup just isn't there. And I think Zach Wilson is in that bucket of quarterbacks more so than the Mac Jones bucket of leadership that an NFL team requires. I think we're going to see Zach Wilson be very similar to what Mitch Trubisky has undergone the last couple of years, where Chicago gave up on him and then he ends up in Buffalo as a backup and then gets a chance to start in Pittsburgh and gets beat out by a first-round rookie because, he just isn't good enough. And I think, unfortunately for Jets fans, Zach Wilson, if you look at what he's put on tape in his first maybe year and a half, I don't know how many games he's actually started, but he just doesn't look like he can hang in the NFL. He doesn't even look like he looks like a third stringer trying to make the team in the preseason. He just doesn't have any of those moments where you say, oh, wow, I get it. I see why he was the second pick. I get it. Wow, that was a Patrick Mahomes story. You remember, Luke, it was crazy. During the pre-draft process, he was getting Patrick Mahomes comps. And he certainly had his glory days at BYU. But what a lot of draft analysts said back then, which is proving to be true now, is there was some level of competition concerns. He was basically never under pressure at BYU. His offensive line protected him well. And it was, again, almost like playground football there. So he doesn't seem to me to be a guy that could even, I just don't even see him being in the league that long. I know it's crazy, but I don't think he makes it through one contract with the Jets. And I'd be stunned if he gets any kind of, second act somewhere else as a starter. He'll have to be a backup for in my opinion, if I'm projecting what I've seen from Zach Wilson now, he's an NFL backup at best.
Now, if you remember, and this isn't the first time it's happened, it's not the last time it's happened, but there was a throw at Zach Wilson's pro day, right? It was like the highlight that went all around, and he rolls out and makes this throw that I guess is like the new throw that every quarterback has to do at their pro day, right? Do you actually buy the idea that one moment like that, even in such a controlled environment, a scripted pro day workout with your college receivers where everything is meticulously planned out to make you look great, do you buy the idea that even in that atmosphere, one throw like that can actually impact NFL decision makers? Like, they actually look at that and look past all of that context and say, wow, I just got to have that guy because of that moment. Do you think that actually happens?
I think, Luke, I don't think there's much separating guys who actually make decisions for real in front offices from draft analysts, draft Twitter, however you want to describe it, where when you get into those February, March, and April months where you have combine and pro days, and even before that, maybe the All-Star games, everybody's looking for that one piece of information, that one kernel for confirmation bias. Everybody who loved Zach Wilson will let that throw be the defining moment of the pre-draft process. The "see, I told you so" moment, because they want that confirmation bias. It happens when a guy runs a 4.29 or has the best week of practices at the Senior Bowl or makes one scripted throw against air that, yeah, sure, it's a great, unbelievable act of passing a football, but it does not do anything to change a player's evaluation if the evaluation is based off of film and other general, well-founded principles of talent evaluation. But, if the Jets were high on Zach Wilson and they saw that throw, it's only going to confirm, whoa, see, we told you so. They're all going to be toasting each other in the press box because now he looks like the next coming of Patrick Mahomes. But, remember Johnny Manziel's pro day? That was a phenomenal pro day. He came out with the smoked out visor and he was just slinging it all over the field. And, he ended up being a first round washout as well. So these pro days, that's a very, very slippery slope. They're often fool's gold. And We've seen, remember Kyle Bowler, dating myself here, but he was one of the first guys on one knee to launch at 50 yards, and
to
that
the
put him in the
goalpost.
first
Yeah.
round. Remember? So these
Yep.
these pro day throws are as old as the draft process is itself. And unfortunately, I think people just want to confirm their opinion in by any means necessary. And that's a perfect example of it.
It is. And I mean, we've talked about the guys who haven't maybe lived up to expectations, right? I think Mac Jones, you could maybe say maybe he was deserving of the 15th overall pick because, again, the position's so important that even to have, like you said, a quality starter, even somewhere above average, even just a little bit, maybe that's worth the 15th pick. I don't know. But there are two guys that I feel like have separated themselves. And one guy, I feel like it was obvious going into the draft that these two guys would be that, right? Wasn't that case? That wasn't the case on draft weekend, right? It didn't play out that way. Trevor Lawrence went number one, just like we knew he would when he played against, Alabama in the playoffs as a freshman, right? We knew that he was destined for that. He ended up going wire to wire as that guy, which is hard to do. That doesn't happen a lot, where you kind of see a guy emerge and you're like, wow, he's going to be the number one pick. And it actually happens. He did that. I feel like, his rookie year, there were some bumps and bruises. There were some turnovers. I feel like now this season, we're finally starting to see who he can become. How do you feel about Trevor Lawrence, what you've seen, particularly this year compared to last year? And what do you think that means for his development moving forward? Because I know the mystery is out of the bag. You don't have him as the best quarterback out of this class. So we'll talk about him next. What are your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence?
I mean, are we surprised by this? I mean, right? Like Trevor Lawrence has been crowned this guy since he stepped foot on campus. I mean, he is playing exactly the way everyone predicted he would play. Mel Kiper, the godfather of draft analysts, said it was the highest quarterback grade I think he ever gave, higher than John Elway. That, for as much as people want to poke fun at Mel Kiper, I mean, that is important, right? This is a guy who you have to respect wisdom of people who have been doing it for years. And this is an inherent process. This process is inherently involves failure, right? So you're going to be wrong a bunch of times. But when you've been doing it for 40 years and you give a guy the highest grade you've ever given a quarterback, it's just, puts context behind what Trevor Lawrence's expectations were. And of course, when you start your career in an organization that has just Urban Meyer chaos all around you, how could anybody be successful in that environment, let alone a rookie quarterback playing for a team that was clearly in the very first year of a massive overhaul in terms of talent and just coaching and just philosophy and culture? First half of this season, maybe, again, a little bit of a turbulent start, but now we're seeing Trevor Lawrence be exactly who Jacksonville and every team that scouted him last year thought he would be. The franchise absolute QB1, no doubt about it. This guy is going to make the Jacksonville Jaguars a perennial playoff contender for years and years, just like Peyton Manning did with the Colts. Peyton Manning, people forget, set the NFL interception record as a rookie, only to come back in his second year in 1999 and then lived on for the rest of football lore to be the guy who was one of the greatest to ever play the game. Will Trevor Lawrence reach those heights? I'm not going to rule it out. He's that good. And we're just seeing it now. The numbers are starting to match his talent. And what we're realizing here, Luke, is that people just need to be patient. They need to calm down a little bit. Let's stop rushing to judgment. People were ready to give up on Jalen Hurts because he didn't come out of the gates as this incredible quarterback, a second-round pick, and he's an MVP candidate this year, right? Yep. Trevor Lawrence last year, everybody was saying Mac Jones was better than Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that narrative has disappeared faster than a summer thunderstorm. So to me, this should give every analyst who covers the game, who covers the draft, who does these rookie reviews and second-year report card reviews, slow down, especially a quarterback, let these guys mature, give them at least 2 full seasons as a starter, or in the case of Zach Wilson, if there's an egregious, obvious, clearly this guy doesn't have it series of events that unfold, you could put your neck on the line and make an opinion. But Trevor Lawrence is who we thought he was, man. You loved him. I loved him as a prospect. I don't know if any analyst didn't love him. Anybody who said that Trevor Lawrence wasn't going to be good was just being a contrarian. I mean, he's a generational quarterback prospect, and we're just seeing the start of this. He's only just beginning.
I feel like it was that drive against Baltimore, right? I feel like that was the moment where you're like, he's arriving now. Like that's, game on the line. You're playing against a pretty good team in Baltimore. You're doing it in front of your home crowd, and you need to make multiple fourth down conversions, right? Multiple tight window throws. Obviously, you need your guys to make plays, but he's showing the confidence in his receivers to make plays with the game on the line. He's not gun shy in the pocket, and he makes all of those throws, even the 2-point conversion. Got back on his back foot and just let it rip, even though the receiver was pretty much covered, and put the ball in a perfect spot. I feel like that drive was his coming of age moment. Like that was the moment we saw him become the guy in the NFL that we all projected him to be.
And I think we're going to look back at moments like that, and just even last week, coming back a week after what looked like could have been a season-ending or even career-altering injury, the way he was bent over like a pretzel.
Man. That's what I thought when I saw it. I was like, it's over.
He's throws for 360 yards and a couple touchdowns. I mean, he's going to be that dude. I mean, fantasy football, if he's on your dynasty squad, you're set for the next 15 years.
I think what I loved most about him from Sunday is his reaction to the kneel down at the end. Did you see that?
I did not.
So the Titans, they try to push the pile right on the last kneel down, and like got up in his face and pushed the guys back into his face. And he gets out in front of the offensive lineman, and he's jawing at the Titans. He's up in their face. He's pointing at the scoreboard. He's saying, we just whooped your ass. You can get up in my face all you want to. Look at the scoreboard. That's the kind of stuff that I think, especially as an offensive lineman, you look behind you and you're like, yeah, that's my guy.
And I'll tell you, I was over the summer, my family, we went to the Bahamas. We were at a hotel resort, and we're there, and I'm looking around, and it was like maybe 2 weeks before NFL training camps were going to kick off. And I'm looking around, I'm like, it's like John Fox is over here, and I saw another familiar face in the league. I'm like, wow, I guess this is like a destination where maybe some of these guys come before the season starts.
Right.
And then I look over at, we're walking through the casino, and I look over at one of the blackjack table or something, and I'm like, that's Trevor Lawrence, and all his Jaguar skill player teammates were there. And I'm like, all right, I you know how it, I've been around professional athletes quite a bit. You want to let them live their life. You don't want to be starstruck around these guys. But I had my 2 sons with me, and they're football fans. And they're like, oh my God, it's Trevor Lawrence. And I'm like, we have to, I can't leave this place right now and not at least try to get a picture with my kids for Trevor.
Hey, it didn't stop the 49ers players from doing it to Tom Brady on Sunday after the game. So if they can do it, I feel like you can do it.
So I went right up to him, tapped him on the back. I'm like, Trevor, big fan. My sons are huge fans. Would you mind just taking a picture with him? He jumped right up. Oh, man, no problem. That's great. Oh, put his arms around him. I have all these pictures with my sons of Trevor Lawrence. He was talking with them. Just super cool guy. You could tell he gets it. And then I realized, oh, man, what did I just start? Because behind me was probably a line of 10 people, maybe more. And you know what? That dude did not sit back down. He took pictures with everybody. Class act. Absolute. You could see how he is what you want as the face of a franchise. Not only is he unbelievably physically gifted, but he gets it, right? I mean, he's a young guy too, and he totally gets it. He could have been a total jerk. I'm like, man, I'm on vacation now. I'm not doing pictures. No. He was all in. He was great. He was just a true class act. So I'm really happy that he's having this kind of season.
He called me right after that happened, and he was like, man, you're not going to believe this. This dude just interrupted my blackjack game, and then like 80 other people lined up. I don't know who that guy was, but God, man, I hate that guy. He told me.
You got to get him on that. You should tell him to jump on that one football show,
Trevor Lawrence does not call me, just to be careful, just to be completely clear about that. I'm sure he does not hate your guts. I'm sure. And again, you love to see that from somebody who has every reason to not do that, right? He's got every reason to be like, hey, thanks, appreciate it, but no, I don't want to do that. Or, hey, I'm with my family, but, which again, that's they reserve their right to do that. And I'm obviously cool with that too. So it is cool when they decide to take time and do that, especially for the kids. That's fantastic, man. But I feel like we put it off long enough. The number 1 quarterback from this draft class. And again, I'll let you have your moment, but my big board that year was Trevor Lawrence at 1, Kyle Pitts at number 2, and Justin Fields at number 3. And I thought 3 was low because if there's not Kyle Pitts in that draft, right, a ridiculous all-world athlete at tight end / wide receiver, a weapon that just doesn't come along very often, Justin Fields is easily the number 2 prospect in that class. And I feel like if there's any other draft that doesn't have Trevor Lawrence in it, Justin Fields is the easy slam dunk number 1 overall pick franchise quarterback. So
I will say this on behalf of all Chicago Bears fans, probably coast to coast. We're all very happy Kyle Pitts was in that draft, because if he wasn't, Justin Fields would probably be an Atlanta Falcon and not a Chicago Bear, right?
See,
and for whatever
I would believe that, but how many other teams passed on Fields in the same division as the Falcons? The Panthers didn't take him. Denver didn't take him. The Giants shouldn't have traded with y'all. They should have stayed there and taken him themselves. What are they doing?
We've seen this in recent history. How many teams passed on Josh Allen? How many teams passed in that same draft on Lamar Jackson? Right? It seems like the most
Jalen Hurts at this point, right?
Exactly. I think the guys that are a little polarizing, the guys that maybe come in as raw passers, even though I don't think Justin Fields was a raw passer.
No.
NFL teams, I think they still tend to err on the side of how polished of a passer are you. And if you can run on top of that, great. But they still are old school with the pocket passer mentality. And I think that's obviously starting to change because of what you see happening around the league. You have the best team in the NFC is led by a quarterback who entered the league as a mobile quarterback, not a passer first, and Jalen Hurts. Josh Allen entered the league as a great athlete with a howitzer of an arm, but unpolished. I think he had 53% completion percentage or something like that his last year at Wyoming. So NFL teams still, I think, are afraid of the guy that they're not sure if he can actually throw the ball. But the reality is Justin Fields was never that guy, dude.
He wasn't. That's what
he
kills
was
me,
the
man.
number 1 quarterback in high school. He was dominant in college at Ohio State on the highest level, made incredible throws on all 3 levels of the field. Not to mention he was one of the best athletes that we've seen at the position since a guy like Lamar Jackson and maybe before that, Michael Vick. So the fact that he kept sliding in the first round, because I was right there with you, Luke. I had Justin Fields right up there with Trevor Lawrence. I did have Trevor Lawrence as the number 1 quarterback and player in the draft, but Justin Fields was my number 2 quarterback that year. When he was sliding, Trey Lance and there was rumors about Mac Jones being the 49ers pick, and I just couldn't believe it. And then when you see the Carolina Panthers and even the New York Giants, I know they had Daniel Jones just a couple of years earlier, but the Giants traded out of this pick that ended up being Justin Fields. Imagine that Giants team right now with that coaching staff, what they were able to do with Josh Allen, having Justin Fields. So for Bears fans who have gone essentially lifetimes, literally, without a franchise quarterback, over at bearstalk.com, you can grab the Chosen One hoodie or t-shirt because he literally is the Chosen One. He has become the savior of football in Chicago. And I think we have not even begun to see what he's capable of, because he's essentially spent half of his season throwing to Luke Easterling and Bryan Perez. And now he finally has a guy like Chase Claypool, who this year's a wash. He's not going to get any real returns from Chase Claypool until next year when he has a full offseason in the system. Darnell Mooney's now hurt. And Darnell Mooney is probably more of a wide receiver 2 than a true wide receiver 1. So Justin Fields is just getting started for him. And look, it's not a fluke to be 76 yards per game is all he needs to break Lamar Jackson's single season rushing record for a quarterback. And I mean, he's been averaging like 135 rushing yards a game over the last 4 weeks. This dude is a freak. He's something different. And what's incredible is the arm and the passing game is starting to catch up with the legs. And that to me is when things get really dangerous. And when we joked in that direct message in terms of tiering that rookie class, who's 1, who's 2, who's 3, I think Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence at this point are probably tied, right? They're probably right where we thought they would both be. Trevor Lawrence is putting up bigger numbers through the air. Justin Fields is putting up bigger numbers on the ground. Trevor Lawrence has some better wide receivers that he's throwing to.
Yep.
It's going to be, I would love to see those 2 guys have that like how Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are developing their little rivalry in terms of yearly duos, and Tom Brady was up against Peyton Manning. I would love if the NFL could somehow figure out a way to get Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields to to go head to head on a regular basis. I know it's tough with scheduling, but that would be fun to see those two guys battle throughout their careers.
I think that the most infuriating thing to me, you mentioned it, was going into that draft and feeling like you had watched a completely different player than every other person who was talking about Justin Fields, because they were talking about him as if he had no film to prove he could make plays from the pocket consistently whatsoever. And I feel like there's this backwards, I don't know if it's unconscious, I don't know if it's what, where if you see a quarterback who can beat you with his legs when he wants to, you assume there's just some automatic switch that goes on in your head that means, oh, because he can do that, he can't beat me with his arm as much. And I feel like you had to ignore so much evidence on tape, especially that last season at Ohio State. And we talk about this all the time, right? You don't want to put too much into one game, right? You don't want to put, you don't want to go too high. You don't want to go too low. If one game kind of sways your scouting report one way or the other, right? You're not going to pick a guy based on one game. But if you could have tailored a quarterback performance to want to show NFL teams, how about in the college football playoff? How about against Clemson, against Brent Venables and one of the best defenses in the country? How about you break a rib or two, however, whatever that injury was that he sustained about halfway through that game in the second quarter, and then you come back in the second half and you drop 6 touchdown passes through the air on that defense in the playoffs, and you're telling me that's a guy that can't check the pocket passer box for you? And I just don't like, this is an evaluation problem that I see in so many, in just the industry in general, where the athleticism and the running ability is not viewed as a addition, as added value. It's almost viewed as a detriment. Like you think, oh, because he can run, that means he's lesser of a passer. Now, there's an argument to be had, and we could bring Trey Lance back into this, about the durability and whether or not that, and Justin Fields has gotten banged up a little bit this season too. But that's its own conversation. But don't come and tell me that because a guy is athletic and because you see him making plays with his arms, you're going to ignore 6 touchdown passes against Clemson in the playoffs and all the things that Justin Fields did on a consistent basis to win from the pocket. And honestly, Lamar Jackson did a lot more of that than he got credit for that last year at Louisville as well. I mean, it's infuriating to me because I feel like we're watching 2 different players.
And I think what you're saying is 100% accurate. I feel like the honest evaluator who was breaking down Justin Fields as a quarterback prospect saw a guy who could do everything that's required of a quarterback in the NFL from an arm talent standpoint. And he brought a nuclear arsenal of weaponry with his legs. So when you could do everything an NFL quarterback is required to do as a passer, and you could do things that are rare with your legs as a runner, to me, that pushes you into a rare category of quarterback, and the upside is almost limitless. And what I thought was funny was coming into this last year's draft, Justin Fields now entering his second season, but coming into this last year's draft, you have 2 Ohio State wide receivers. Chris Olave was deemed the best route runner, and I love Chris Olave. You know what I think of Chris Olave. I think he's like another Stephon Diggs type player in the league.
Yep.
But when they're showing his highlight package on draft weekend and whatnot, he's making all these great routes and catching dimes from Justin Fields 2 years ago as, a perfectly thrown passes. When Chris Olave at that time, when Justin Fields came out in 21, everyone thought Chris Olave was going to come out. It was a surprise that he went back to school for his final season because of such a great year he had from Justin Fields. There was some speculation the Bears would try to trade back into the first round to reconnect Chris Olave and Justin Fields. If you're going to showcase all these routes that Olave is running and these perfectly thrown balls that he's catching and taking to the house, the guy on the other end of it for a good portion of those throws was Justin Fields, but he was never talked about that way the year earlier. And even some of Garrett Wilson's highlights came from the right arm of Justin Fields. So I think, there are probably, and this is for another day and another time, there's probably some deeply rooted reasons why guys like Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, and the list goes on and on and on, don't get the credit of looking the part of the traditional quarterback. And as a result, they get knocked for it. There is absolutely no reason in the world that a guy like Mac Jones should have been in the same territory of draft prospect as Justin Fields. The fact that Zach Wilson, who had 1.5 good years at BYU, was the second pick instead of a guy like Justin Fields, who was QB1 since his high school days in Georgia, has literally dominated every level of competition he's ever played against, including the highest level of college football at Ohio State. To think that that guy was not going to be able to do it in the NFL and push a kid like Zach Wilson all the way up to the number 2 pick, whose resume was far less impressive. I don't know. Some guys, I guess, look the traditional part. Some guys don't. That's up for a debate on. It's over my pay grade. But I will just say this. Hopefully the NFL is learning these lessons, and hopefully they learn it as fast as possible, because there will be another Jalen Hurts. There will be another Justin Fields. There will be another Lamar Jackson. Quarterbacks are going to look a lot more like those guys than the players that the league and the history of the league is used to. And the league is so much better for it.
It's a very good
so much
thing.
better for it.
Yes.
The league is so much more exciting. The league is so much more fun. And I think when you look at how dynamic offenses have become, because the most special athletes are now given a chance to play quarterback.
Yep.
These guys who bring high-level intelligence, high-level decision-making, high-level arm talent, elite athleticism with their legs. They're now playing quarterback, finally. And look at what we're seeing, right? The results speak for themselves. So Justin Fields fell. The Bears and the city of Chicago benefited. And I'm hoping the guy can stay healthy and he can continue to develop year over year. Because if he does, I mean, he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory after his first year as a full starter in Chicago. I know people are going to hit my Twitter DMs up and say, you are out of your mind. Homer fan.
Do it.
Say
Everybody go do it.
you want.
Go blow his Twitter up. Tell him.
Luke, Justin Fields became the first quarterback in 70 years to have 3 touchdown runs of over 50 yards. And he did it in 5 weeks. He was the first guy in a quarterback's career to have 50-yard runs or more for touchdowns in the last 70 years. He did it in 5 games. So I'm sorry. That's when things like that start happening that haven't happened for 70 years. Somebody's different, right? He's a different dude. And I think when you start talking about a guy being different, you start projecting, right? If he stays healthy and they put some weapons around him and he keeps doing what he's doing now, and you project that out 10 years, special stuff, man.
Special stuff. And you know what, Bryan, you and I have experienced some really special stuff when we go to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. Is that an accurate way to describe some of the experiences that you and I have had at the Senior Bowl?
Well, I think that's accurate. Special is a good way of putting it, but I think the more accurate description is what we actually call it when we're down there. When we go to Mobile, we actually say we've entered the upside down, the Stranger Things upside down.
It's true. That is what we call it.
That it's like it becomes almost like an alternate reality for all great reasons, of course, but it becomes like an alternate reality.
And along with that, we have some stories. We have a lot of stories that really have inspired this next segment that we're going to have on this show. Because there's probably 8 to 10 stories off the top of our heads that we could talk about our experiences there, but we're going to kick off with a good one, right? We're going to continue this segment throughout the show. We're going to have other people on to talk about some stories and share some other ones, but let's kick off the very first story time here on That One Football Show with one of my favorites from Mobile. So let's do it. Let's do story. I love the 8-bit.
It's amazing, dude. I can listen to it all day.
I'm immediately 8 years old with a square controller in my hand, or even like Commodore 64 with the actual joystick, and you're loading the floppy disks that are like this big. That's
Best era.
It is. It's true. But seriously, Bryan, when we think about if we were to make like a top 5 stories, it would be a tough cut. It'd be a tough cut to make in terms of what we've experienced. We're going to tell a story that we like to call Killer Cab Santa. And if that just sounds ridiculous to you, I promise that the experience of it was it was like that. It was like that. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start? Like, this is we called a cab and we regretted it very quickly, didn't we?
Well, I mean, this is one of those stories that it's hard to kind of track the beginning, middle, and end because to this day, it still is a combination of pure comedy and horror, right?
Yeah.
Uh, super long story short, we had to catch a cab from our hotel to the weigh-ins. I think it was the
Right.
weigh-ins, right? Was it
No,
the
no, no. It
weigh-ins?
was at night. It was night. So down in Mobile, our hotel that we stay at, we found like a little gem of a hotel, right? That's like not super expensive, and it's about what 10 minutes from downtown, like a quick cab right into downtown. So if you go to practice during the day and then you go back to the hotel or whatever, and you get your work done and you write up your notes from the practices or whatever. You've had more barbecue than any human being should ever have. We've got so many stories. We got to tell the Reggie McKenzie story at some point.
Ooh, we might
I mean,
not. We might not have permission to tell that one.
we might not. Well, I mean, I'll have the person on
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got,
who
yeah,
who
exactly,
experienced it, and I
exactly.
will let that person tell the story. Um, I can't.
That
I
was
can't unsee that. I can't
that,
unsee that.
no.
It's
That
unbelievable.
was that might be number
I'm
one.
sure Reggie McKenzie can't unsee it either, and that's the whole point.
I mean, that might that might be number one.
It's so good. So anyway, so you get your work done, and then eventually everybody ends up back downtown, right? Everybody hits a couple of different bars, a couple of different places to eat. So that's what you do, right? You're going to be probably having a couple beers while you're down there. So you catch a cab down, you catch an Uber back, whatever. So that's what we've done it a bunch of times, right? So we call the cab, and the cab gets there, and who picks us up? First of all, it was a van, by the way. Do you remember this? It was a van, a giant van that picked us up. Who picked us up, Brian?
So and it's fitting this time of year. We get in the van, and first thing we notice, it's a jolly, perfect mall style Santa Claus. I mean, when you
Yes.
talk about a
He
guy
didn't
who
have the red
just
suit, but like I think he had like
looks
overalls or
the
something. Like
part.
definitely
I
Santa.
mean, when you talk about that whole like scouting term and getting off the bus on the hoof, looks the part.
Yeah.
This guy was mall Santa, first round grade, possibly blue chipper. Put him in a red suit. He's got the gig. And the wonderful part about this cab driver was he was so friendly and nice when we got in the cab and we're driving. And he's, you can notice, at least when I was speaking, I'm not from the area, kind of like small talk. And then, the ride was like you said, Luke, about 10 minutes or maybe a little bit longer than that. So the conversation transitioned to him telling us about his family, right? He's got a beautiful little granddaughter and how he actually played the part of Santa for whatever Girl Scouts or something she was doing and rode his motorcycle to this thing and whatever. It's wonderful. Just a heartwarming cab ride. It felt blessed to be with this guy. And for one reason or another, I still like this is where it gets fuzzy.
Okay.
The conversation shifted to
it did.
And we will leave some of the specifics out, but the conversation shifted to Uber started to kind of become a relevant real thing where Uber was impacting cab drivers and the business of, being a taxi cab driver. And now you have Uber kind of competing for rides and whatnot. And he started talking about how you got to be really careful when you pick up people because you never know what could happen. And he has a camera in his cab and talked about somebody who I think ended up having a problem with an Uber driver down there. And then the concept of violent crime became the talking point. Now, mind you, this shifted from seeing pictures of his granddaughter,
which by the way, I need to point out, he was showing us pictures while driving. And so this is already even the heart.
There were some early red flags. There were some early red flags.
Starting to look at each other like, I think we might have we should have waited for the next one because we were already trying to be really nice, but also be like, hey, could you please keep your eyes on the road? It was at night. I think it was probably kind of wet outside because it had been raining that year. That's cool and all, but maybe show us at a red light or maybe just tell us. We'll believe you. It's fine. So we, like you said, early red flags that we should have known it, but we could not have possibly understood how much worse this was going to get.
So I'm gonna let you, Luke, tell the grand finale because I don't know how much of the story this is. That one football show. This is your production. I don't want to get you kicked off of YouTube with the details that I would probably explain. So
here's all I will say is this is what happened. is, like you said, he was regaling us with all of these different examples and these anecdotes about this has happened, and then this happened, and then this one time this one person was doing this, and like clearly trying to convey that like it's a dangerous job, right? It's a job where you have to be careful, and you never know what's going to happen. You always have to be aware and try to be as safe as you can. And then I swear to you, like he paused at the end of like telling us a bunch of these stories, like trying to get us. And I don't know if maybe he just didn't think we understood the gravity of what he was trying to understand. Like we didn't appreciate what he was going through and the toughness of that job, because he paused.
This was his Zach Wilson pro day throw.
It was. He uncorked this one. He paused, and you and I were already feeling the vibe, right? You already exchanged a few glances. We're like, this is the weirdest cab ride like ever. And that's including the lady who showed up to pick us up asleep, right? Remember that? That was a different story.
I remember.
We got out to the cab, and the woman in the cab was asleep, like asleep.
We knocked on the window
cab anyway, which is really stupid. But anyway, so he gets to this part of the story where there's a pause, and you and I kind of looked at each other like, wow, this is really weird. He pauses for effect, and then again, just looking straight ahead, not looking at us at all, in the most calm, deadpan voice I've ever heard someone say these words. The words come out of his mouth. Yeah, I killed a man once. And that is as silent as it was right after he said that, because then the look you and I exchanged was a much different look, because we were still about 10, 12 blocks from Veets, the bar we were headed to that evening where everybody kind of congregates. And it became like, wow, this is weird too. We might not get home. And that's a little bit of a different emotion at that point. So he did go into detail about the situation, and obviously, tried to diffuse the weight of that by saying that obviously it was a situation where he was in the right, and was being defensive in the situation. But I don't know. All of that kind of pales in comparison to that one moment, Bryan, where you and I exchanged that look in that taxi van with a Santa Claus who had just admitted to us that he had killed someone.
It's there's that new movie coming out. What is it called? Violent Night or something, with the guy with the right. Every time that commercial comes on, every time that trailer comes on, I say to myself, you know what? We were with the OG Violent Santa Claus.
Yeah, right. It could have been a violent night for us. It was,
but it felt for a minute when he transitioned into kind of confessing that he was committed this violent crime. It almost felt like I could hear the Keith Morrison narrator voice from Dateline, and like two innocent guys just going right. I felt like it was about to take a turn.
Any other until
right. I felt like it was about to take that turn, because it's like he set it up slowly, built up, and then it was like, oh, it's it. We are going to meet our maker.
They thought they had the perfect cab driver.
Yeah, right.
Then tragedy struck.
But I'll tell you what, I mean, every year around this time, I want to go back to the Senior Bowl. And I was there last year. You weren't down there, Luke, but I went last year. And I think one of the best things about the Senior Bowl, and Jim Nagy and his whole crew deserves the biggest hat tip and shout out for what the job they do down there. It really is an incredible, not only for the football junkie, the draft junkie, the draft analyst, the person who wants to get into talent evaluation. It's the ultimate destination. It's like Disneyland for football fans.
Right.
It's also a great place to bring draft Twitter to like reality, to actually meet people, to network. I can't tell you the number of opportunities that I've had open up for me because of conversations at Veets over a couple of years. Yeah. So if anybody's listening to this or watching this who's wanting to break into the business and wants to say, how do I get started? Number one, get active on Twitter, regardless of what you think of the politics of it or the ownership of it now or whatever. Just drown out all that noise. Get active on draft Twitter and football Twitter. Launch your own independent website. That's what Luke and I did years ago.
Yep, that's what.
And then build a little bit of a following and get to the Senior Bowl. Get down there. Go have a couple beers at Veets, and you will meet people, and opportunities will come from that, especially if you know what you're doing and you kind of carry yourself well. Because, look, there's a lot of strange birds out there too, right? There's a lot of – we were down there, Luke, and we were looking around. We're like, If
It's
you got your
that
stuff together, if you're a guy or gal in this business and you got your stuff together and you can carry yourself well, you'll go very far in it, because the competition, there are some people out there that even have gigs that maybe are a little underqualified for them. So the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, like I said, what he does down there, creating an open opportunity. Like, he credentials a lot of individuals, even if
Yep.
you have a standalone website and you don't think that your website is big enough to get a credential. The Senior Bowl is one of those.
We did.
Exactly. The Senior Bowl is one of those events where you can actually break in. You could become a credentialed member of the media. And that matters. It matters to be able to put on your About Us page. It matters on your resume that you covered a live event, that you went to press conferences or whatever when the players speak.
Just getting used to the etiquette, getting used to doing the work.
So kudos to Jim Nagy. And honestly, at night, the stories are great. Whoever's been there knows.
The Senior Bowl, I think, to me, after going for like 2 or 3 years, I started to realize that it was like a theme park for NFL people. Like it was like a retreat, like a weird, because if you've ever been to an NFL game or anything like that, the NFL is a completely secure entity, right? Like there's the players over there and they're doing their thing, and the owners and whoever, and then the fans are over here. And obviously there's some interaction here and there, but when there's an NFL event happening, there's usually some distance, between most of the people who's going. When you go to Mobile, Alabama, the last week in January, every single person that has anything to do with the NFL, with the exception of maybe the commissioner, I don't know that he goes, but that whole week, Brian, you've been there so many times with me, everyone is there.
Well, Luke, I'll jump in. A quick little side story. I remember the morning after a long night at Beats. Couple beers, you got to get up early to go to the practice. Stomach's not feeling too great. There's a little pharmacy on the main drag down there, and I go in there.
Yes, I love this. This is great.
I got to get some antacids or something, man. My stomach just is not feeling right. You've all been there. If you've gone out drinking late, get up early, you know the deal. So I'm in the aisle looking for this little like hole in the wall pharmacy, and I'm like stuff's all over the shelves. I just want to just chug some Pepto or some antacid. I'm looking. And I see like the section where the stuff is. And I put my hand out to grab it. And there's another hand literally going for like the same bottle of Pepto. I'm like, I look over. It's Dan Marino.
Yes, it is.
I mean, maybe he had the shits too. I don't know. He's going to grab a bottle of Pepto. And I'm looking over. And I'm like, me and Dan Marino are the only two people in this place. Dan Marino. And I know right now that this man's having some stomach trouble because we're both trying to grab some Pepto-Bismol at the exact same time.
Hey,
and I'm like,
only and one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in that moment. You're on the same list as Dan Marino in that moment.
I had the same life as him. We were in the same reality. Our worlds, literally.
No different whatsoever.
We had the exact same life experience. And that can only happen at the Senior Bowl.
It's so true, man. There's no way. There's no way. And there's so many of those moments just right off the top of my head that's what I mean. Like, and the Senior Bowl does a great job with fans. There's always a bunch of fans there and they're autographing stuff and everything. Because again, all the decision makers, the general managers, the scouts, there's so many people that are there, and it is just such a fun experience, even from a fan perspective, to be there. But if you're anywhere adjacent to this business and you want to get involved with this, like Brian said, it's just such a great place to go and get your feet wet a little bit, get used to being around all of those different people in the league, because the level of access during that event is just second to none.
If you look at everybody who's basically dominating draft Twitter and even football media right now, all the guys at the Draft Network, a whole bunch of editors in the USA Today Wire Network. You just go down the list of Pro Football Focus has a bunch of guys, writers who are essentially driving the conversation outside of obviously the ESPN and NFL.com guys. The names that are driving the conversation all started by going to the Senior Bowl with some.
Yeah, we were all at the same table at Dreamland Barbecues 10 years ago.
We kind of came up in a golden era, Luke. We were very fortunate when we got involved, because if you really do look around at some of our contemporaries, it's pretty amazing the journey that a lot of these guys and gals have gone on, because we were all in the same place around the same time.
Yep.
And what's great now is some of those people are decision makers at digital properties who can hire the next wave of people like them and get down to Mobile, get down there. I don't know if I'll make it this year, Luke. I know we've talked off air a
Yeah, I
bunch
don't
of
know,
times
man.
about it, but it's usually like a last minute booking. Like, you know what, the
Right.
urge to get down there, the itch comes later and later, it seems like.
I
But
just need to be sitting on cold bleachers with a hot chocolate in like 40-degree
I'm
rain,
telling you, man.
watching like offensive tackle one-on-ones against pass rushers. I just gotta have it.
Honestly, I think more about Beats when it's all done, just sitting there for the beer, just bullshit, BSing, having a good laugh. And that makes it all worth it, man. That makes it all worth it.
There is nothing better than see, there's just so many stories. I got to be careful. I'm just going to drop all the great senior blood. We'll tell the Matt Rule story some other time, right?
Well,
We'll tell the
Bruce Arians too.
the Veets, Matt Rule. Yep, Bruce Arians going to the break. Great. So just basically keep coming back to the show. Keep coming back for story time, because we will continue. I'll just have to have Bryan on cyclically, because we'll just every time we'll have to just bring about another story or two. What we found in the trunk that one time in the rental car.
That
I mean,
listen,
there's
you're
so
gonna
many.
push this to a 2-hour show if we keep bringing
and we
these
got
up.
to stop. We got to break it down. Hey, but wait, what a way to kick this off, man. Again, nobody I'd rather have to kick this thing off. I'm excited about it. Again, I said it at the top. There's so much great content out there. And one thing I was telling somebody this just the other day. One of the things I love about the experience that I've had working in this business is that so many of those peers that we kind of came up with at the same time, and so many of the people that are creating content now, there's just such a lack of adversarial, activity going on, where I think there's so many of us that realize NFL fans love to talk about this stuff. They love to watch these things. They love to read, and there's no reason to bicker about who's doing what or whatever. Read all of it, share all of it, pump your friends' stuff up, and put it out there, and tell people to go read it and direct them to what's going on. And I feel like there's very much an attitude that wants people to do that. There's the people who are putting out the content aren't trying to, we technically, are we trying to compete for those clicks and those eyeballs? I mean, sure we are, but we're not. The personality of a lot of the people that are doing that, I feels like it's kind, it's very welcoming. It's like, hey, we're all just, at the end of the day, we all just love this game, right? That's why we're here. Again, the world doesn't need another football show, but we love talking about this stuff. It's a fun way for you and I to get on here on a Tuesday night. We're recording this and just have a good time and talk about old times, talk about new times, talk about what's going on in the league. And I can't wait to have other people on this show and hear their perspectives. Again, I'm going to be shooting for the moon and making sure that I get people on this show that are going to teach me something and have experienced so many things within this sport that we all love. But that's really all it is, man. It's an excuse to get on here and have a good time. And we hope anybody who's here watching this is going to have a good time with us. We got a lot of fun plans for it. But Bryan, thanks so much for helping me kick it off, man. This was a blast.
Hey, Luke, I'll always be your first, man.
Hey, this is it, man. We had a good time. I love your setup, man. I love the Bears helmet. I love
Appreciate
the lights.
it, man.
You're looking great back there.
You got to rep the Bears, man. Everybody out there, just head over to bearstalk.com. That's where all my work is now. I spent a lot of time, as Luke mentioned earlier, doing Bears work for USA Today. Then I went over to NBC Sports Chicago and covered the Bears for them, and had a brief stint at the Draft Network doing Bears work for them. And then I said to myself, you know what? I'm done doing Bears work for other people. It's time to do Bears work for my own digital property. So bearstalk.com was launched. I'm so super excited about its growth. So follow on Twitter at the Bears Talk. Bears Talk also selling some swag. You can get some fun Bears gear there. Luke, I appreciate you having me on, man. Anytime you want to talk Justin Fields, I'm ready to roll.
Hey, I got to do it, man. I got to do it. You got to head over to bearstalk.com. You got to check it out. Buy yourself a hoodie, buy yourself a beanie, whatever you want to get. They got stuff. It's going to be so fun if you're a Bears fan, if you're a draft fan, you love those players. You got to do it. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up. First episode is in the can, man. This was a lot of fun. Can't wait to have you back. Can't wait to talk about more stories. But thanks for hanging out, Bryan.
Thanks for having me, Luke.
That's going to do it. That's that one football show. That is one football show. Booked, done. We got it done. Can't wait to show you guys the next one. But thanks so much for sharing this hour with us and going through these stories. Again, if you want to see my work, it's at draftwire.usatoday.com, buckswire.usatoday.com. Follow us on Twitter, Bryan at Bryan Perez NFL, myself at Luke Easterling. And thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you.